What is consciousness? And what does it mean to truly live life awake? Welcome to Clarity to Consciousness, a podcast where we transcend beyond stereotypes, embracing a deeper understanding. I'm your host, Kristen Griffiths, a fellow seeker on this path. Join me on a journey as we dive into conversations with experts, unraveling stigmas, and expanding our awareness to something profound. This is your invitation to open your mind with me as together we bring clarity to the fascinating complexities of human consciousness. Welcome to the Clarity to Consciousness podcast. I'm Kristen, and I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today. Today's episode is near and dear to my heart, and that's because today's guest is one of the most positive, impactful forces in my life. He's an entrepreneur, international speaker, author, and coach. For more than 2 decades, he's impacted thousands of people who've experienced powerful transformations through his training, online courses, and group and private coaching. He's a leader called upon by leaders, named a top 5 coach by Thrive Global alongside names like Tony Robbins. He has consulted and coached startup entrepreneurs, creatives, public figures, all the way up through billionaire CEOs on living a more intentional and purposeful life. And finally, alongside his powerhouse wife, Aniston, he's the co-founder of InPowered Life podcast and InPower University. It is my absolute delight and honor to introduce you to someone who's become a dear friend. Please welcome Rudi Riekstins to the podcast today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be sitting on this side of the microphone today and to get to watch you doing what you do. To everyone that's listening, you're in for a treat because you're going to get nothing but beautiful gems out of Kristen. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Oh, thanks, Rudi. That means so much to me. So, can you share with the audience a little bit about your background and how life has brought you here with us today?
You know, I love that question. And the question is so much bigger than the response that I think most people are anticipating whenever they hear somebody ask that question, because I like to turn the question on every single listener, because every single moment that is happening in your life is always perfectly preparing you for who you get to become. And who I am today is the total sum of every single thought and feeling and decision and then experience that I've ever had that led me to be qualified to be who it is that I am today. And so whenever I'm asked a question like that, similar to that, I love to inject the thought that you are the sum total of everything you've ever done, every experience you've ever had, every trial, every tribulation, every success, every failing forward has beautifully, divinely, perfectly prepared you to become who you are right now. And so the real question is, what do you do with what has been your life experience? You know, for me, I grew up in a really small coastal town in South Africa. We didn't have a tremendous amount of money. So I grew up feeling like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worthy. We didn't have the nice clothes or the nice car or the nice house. And I went to a school that was very militant, very strict. They whipped and caned us and beat us. And, you know, my memory of first and second grade was being called stupid and made to sit on a dunce's chair. And a teacher put a hat on my head that said dunce and said, that's where the stupid kids sit. And at 6 and 7 years old, when your brain doesn't have the ability to process thought with logic and reason, you know, today, if I walk into a room and an authority figure in that room says, hey, you're stupid and sit in the stupid chair, there's no way I'm going to respond or retaliate. I'll just laugh. I'll be like, are you crazy? Because I have logic and I have reason. I have evidence that I've lived this full life and I've stacked all this evidence. And so I've got a vantage point that could challenge the information coming to me. But at 6 or 7, I didn't have that vantage point. And so I heard people say, you're stupid, and I believed them. And all information in the human brain under the age of 6 is absorbed as a fact. And so I heard, you're stupid. I heard, you're not good enough. You know, I saw we didn't have money. And all of these information, you know, the data coming in was absorbed as facts. And so I identified as stupid. I identified as unworthy and not lovable. And so I grew up to be a boy who didn't have really good guy friends, who took advantage of him, who stole money from him or possessions from him, and he never questioned them and he never did anything about it because he never felt worthy of losing the friendships. And then I dated girls, a slew of them, that cheated on me or didn't treat me with love or respect because I wasn't worthy of dating somebody who loved me or respected me. And the only place I found validation was in action, in behavior. And so I tried to do what the world is doing. We want to have something, be something, do something. So we immediately go into action. We want to drive a very specific result. And for me, it was to be successful. So I went into business and I worked my tail off and I became highly successful. And at a very young age, I achieved what I thought would be the accolade in life, in business. You know, you have the money in the bank and the sports cars and the great homes. And when I finally achieved those things, I turned around and I was like, man, I'm just as miserable and just as unhappy as I was when I was 6 years old. I feel just as unworthy. I'm just as unlovable. My relationships are toxic. Nothing's working in my life except I have money. And that doesn't drive or gain success. And so it really started a 20-year journey of self-discovery, of learning who am I and who do I want to be and how do I want to show up in the world. And whenever I'm asked that question, I share those only as an indication of all of those things prepared me for who I am today. Because today I walk into companies and I support mostly high performers, people who have already achieved a tremendous amount of success in life, whether they own major corporations or they're celebrities or athletes or just individuals who are wanting to create a startup company, but they question or challenge themselves, or they've achieved something, but they're unhappy. Man, I just look back at my life and I giggle because I'm so qualified to be able to help them find the joy and the fulfillment and the freedom and the exhilaration in what is life. And so if you're listening and you've heard all that, then I want you to just for a moment, think about all of the things that have ever happened in your life and ask yourself, how are you being prepared or how are you being qualified to be who you came here to be?
Wow. Thank you for that. That was so helpful. And I think that, people think a life coach or a mindset coach, they were born lucky or they were born, having a perfect life. And that's not necessarily the case, or perhaps not in the way people think it may have happened for you. And I think also your experiences make you incredibly relatable to your clients because you have those stories of where you push through. And I know that that's, a lot of those stories have helped you, help me in our coaching experience. And so just for the sake of the listeners, and I thought it might be fun just to share a little bit of our background and working together and how we met. And I'll share from my perspective, which is that I was going through a hard time in life, and I've mentioned this in the podcast before, so I don't want to repeat myself too often, but I was going through a hard time, and I was given this opportunity to go to Italy with a group of girlfriends, and I was struggling to decide whether or not to go because I had a hard time with justifying the idea of taking myself away from my baby and my family at the time, and I had a young child. But I used to hear these commercials on the radio, and that was after I asked for a sign on whether or not I should go, and I would hear commercials for Italy. And I was like, oh my gosh, this must be my sign. I mean, I've never heard a commercial for Italy before. And so what's magical about that experience is the flight over there, I was placed next to this gentleman, and I was going through this transformation, and I had it all in my head, and I kind of looked at this gentleman next to me, and he had these like bracelets on that looked like, and he seemed very spiritual. And I was like, oh, maybe, I'm just going to ask him what he does. And I'm just curious about him. And I struck up a conversation with you. And here we are today after several years and a really wonderful working relationship that has turned into a very supportive friendship. And so that's how it happened. And I would love to hear anything else you want to add to that story, because that's what happened for me.
I think we're recapping a little bit of what we said a moment ago, and that every single moment is always divinely orchestrated. It's always preparing you for the next thing. And when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? We can hear that through the eons of time. But what I want people to really think about is when they ask the question, the information is going to present itself. And that's really what that saying is all about. You said, I really want to go and I want permission to be able to go. I don't want to have guilt or shame about leaving my family and doing something for me and having this incredible experience and pouring into me and loving me. And then all of a sudden the radios flood with ads for trips to Italy, and that is the teacher appears. And then you get on a plane and you're curious and you want to do some inner work and some inner guidance. And then you sit down and you notice somebody's wearing an amethyst bracelet. And then you say, oh, are you spiritual? What do you do for a living? And then the conversation starts, and then it turns into a beautiful friendship. And so much can change in a moment. But what's more important than highlighting that is people need to be present to these moments. And my work is to remind people to be conscious and to remind people that in every moment you need to be present to what's happening, or you're going to go into the default pattern. You see, the other side of that story is you got onto that plane open and ready and receptive for all opportunity. And I got onto that plane and I put on headphones and my hat and I just wanted to put my head down and just chill, because I had had a really, really busy period. And I was looking forward to a 7-hour flight where my phone was not going to ring and I didn't have to talk to anybody. And so that was where I went into that experience. And then you started chatting to me and we had a wonderful conversation. And then I moved because half the plane was empty. And the hostess said, "I'm sorry, you need to go back to your seat." And the minute she said, "You need to go back to your seat," I snapped back into being conscious. I realized in that moment, oh my gosh, I wasn't present to the conversation I was having. I was just chatting to somebody who was sitting next to me who struck up a conversation. It was pleasant. And then I was getting back to, what did I want? I want to sleep. I want to close my eyes. I don't want to talk to a soul for 7 hours because I'm exhausted. And then the hostess says, "Sir, I really need you to sit in your existing seat until the plane takes off." And I never moved off that because I realized in that moment, oh, there is something for me in this seat. I need to be in this very seat because I was put in the seat for a reason. And then when I tried to move, I was put back in the seat. And so I stayed open, I stayed receptive, I stayed present. And then it struck up the incredible conversation that eventually moved to you becoming a client, and then we turned it into a friendship. And so I look at that opportunity, and had I been unconscious to that moment, not present in that moment, I would have got up after the plane took off. Once I heard the ding ding, I would have moved to another seat. I would have laid down, I would have pulled my ball cap down, I would have kept my headphones in, and I would have lost the opportunity that was present in front of me. And so we always have to be present to the moment. And I love to remind people that the greatest gift that we can ever receive in life is only ever the present moment. And you have to stay present to the moment that you're in, because it's the only moment you ever have. And when you're present, incredible miracles happen every day in every way, just like the one that you're talking about on that plane.
Oh, thank you so much. It was probably one of the most magical experiences of my life. I'll be honest. I left that flight feeling just on cloud nine. I just felt so good after talking to you, and I'm so glad that I had a chance to work with you. And I thought, having you on here today, what we could do is we could talk about some of the most powerful lessons that we've worked through in our year working together in a coaching capacity. And to start, I thought that maybe you could share a little taste of what it's like to live in your power. You say that life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And I know that's one of your taglines in your podcast too. So can you expand on that?
You know, life is always serving the person you get to become. And I feel like a broken gramophone today because it's literally the third time I've said that on the show today. But I wouldn't be serving anyone that's listening to this episode if I didn't repeat that statement. You know, life is happening for us. And I like to believe that in every single moment, there's this divine orchestration. There's a very, very intentful thought has gone into what we're going to experience, and that at the end of having that experience, we have awareness. And if we have the awareness, we can do something with that level of awareness. And so it brings meaning and value to all of what we're experiencing. I remind people that we are unbelievably powerful beings, and we can have and we can be and we can do and achieve absolutely anything and everything that we want. If we've got a desire to have something, we're meant to bring that into the world. If we want to do something, we're meant to do that thing. If there is something that we want to achieve, it is our obligation to achieve it. But it's not for us singularly. It's that when we've achieved it, who do we get to become? And then how do we use that to impact the world at large? And so whether you run a team, whether you run a company, whether you're aspiring to go and work in a team, you get to create an impact in every single moment. And if you're not present to the moment, you're living your life by default. 98% of the people on the planet walk around and they are reacting to life, to situations, to circumstances, to anything and everything that is happening in their life. And they're doing it by default. They're doing it based on an automatic program of just reacting and responding and not pausing and thinking, why is this happening? And how is this moment serving me? You know, I could share 1,000 stories with you of 1,000 experiences that have happened to me over the course of my lifetime, but I'm going to stick to one, and I'll make it slightly different than the one that was in the beginning. As a 6.5, 7-year-old boy, I had an older female cousin come and visit us for a couple of weeks, and it was over a vacation, summer vacation, and she was in her teens, and I, again, was a tiny little boy, little older than a toddler, really, at 6, if I think about just the mental capacity of a child. And then, you know, she sexually assaulted me. burnt me with matches and, in my genitalia and just the craziest stuff. But the reason I mention this to you is, at the time, I didn't understand it. And then at the time, she made me do things to her that I didn't understand. And I would beg her and say, please no, and I don't want to, and please stop. And eventually I took the pain and the confusion and the angst and I buried it and I put it away for a really long time. And then I remembered it later in life. All of a sudden, all these memories came back, all the emotion came back, all of the shame came back, the guilt came back, why me, all of these thoughts and feelings came back. And I could sit back and turn around and say, why did that happen to me as a little boy? And why did I bury that? And why did it impact me and all my relationships moving forward and how I felt about myself? And why was that additional information that validated I wasn't good enough or I wasn't worthy? But man, the most beautiful question is not to say, why would it happen to me as a victim, but instead, why did that happen for me? And in doing that, I step into my personal power. I step into a place where I feel like I have a little bit of control around some of the experiences, because we do have control. We don't choose someone driving into us, or we don't choose somebody holding us up at gunpoint, or we don't choose somebody molesting us or worse. But in that moment, we do get to choose how do we want to react to that information. And I reacted as a 6.5-year-old boy as a victim. But when I remembered it later in life, I looked at it as an empowered man. And what's so crazy, Kristen, is that around 60% of the people that I work with today, and I'm talking about high performers in really big companies all over the world, 60% of the people that I touch have suffered some form of sexual abuse or assault. And I can relate to them. And so there isn't a day that I'm not speaking to somebody. I literally, before I got on this podcast episode, just hung up with somebody in corporate America, very high up in a massive organization, and she had been molested by somebody in her family for a period of 8 years. And I'm able to hang up that phone call knowing I've created an impact and have value. And at some point while I'm on that call, I'm thinking in my mind, man, I'm so grateful for my experiences. And so I have love and kindness and compassion for the experience that I had as a 6-year-old boy, because today I get to use it to support people to lessen their pain. And so to me, it was beautiful. It was divinely orchestrated. It was qualifying me. It was preparing me. And I could tell you many stories, and I would turn every one of them into a situation where I am the one that's being empowered versus the person that's being disempowered. When COVID came, every single person in the world got to process COVID however they chose. Most people sat on a couch, started day drinking, and watched a lot of Netflix. And then there were a handful of people that said, what do I have today that I didn't have yesterday? And those people literally transformed their lives. So many people went into COVID before that in a day job, not enjoying what they were doing, in a marriage, not committed, not wanting to be there, whatever the situation, right? But we stay because it's what we know. And then all of a sudden the world shakes underneath us and we start to ask, am I happy? Is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to do? And that presents an opportunity for you to start asking more empowered questions. And people that got up and said, what do I have today that I don't have, or what I didn't have? And that is time or freedom or whatever the opportunities were. And then they started creating something. They literally changed their lives, their industries, their families, whatever they were doing, their marriages, everything in their worlds changed. And they are the better for it, and whoever and whatever they left is the better for it. And the reason I say that is because in every moment, we're always being presented these opportunities to be present and to ask more empowered questions so we can make more empowered decisions. But if you're asking a question like, poor me, versus fascinating, why is this happening and how does it serve me? It changes so much. It changes where you access information in the brain. It changes the risk-taking levels of how you're going to respond to information. And then it changes the actions, the behaviors of what it is that you're doing. And you're going to move your life in a very, very different direction. And so I highly encourage people to start looking at every moment as an opportunity to serve them versus, man, why poor me?
Yeah. That was one of the most powerful lessons you taught me. And how I applied it was, I had situations where I was overlooked or rejected from a job that I wanted. And growing up, I had also, like you, I'd felt kind of small and was called stupid. And I didn't feel very good about myself. And I thought that there was a lot of reflection coming back into my career as an adult. but the lesson that you taught me is, how is this serving me? And so I look back now at those jobs I didn't get, and I realized, with enough time that has gone by, that I realized that if I had gotten those jobs, I wouldn't have got the job that I'm currently in, which is one that's really fueling my passion and serving me in a way that those jobs couldn't. And so I'm really grateful now that I didn't get those jobs. And I think the key is being able to look at the negative situations and look at them in a way that, how are they serving me? I find difficulty in doing it immediately. Sometimes it's later down the road, and you've taught me ways to work through that. Can you share that with us today?
I want to ask the audience to really think about the question I'm about to pose. If you walk into a kitchen, it could be your kitchen at home, it could be somebody else's kitchen, and you see a 6-year-old little boy or little girl standing in front of the stove, and their hand is over the stove and it's being burnt. It's a gas stove, the flame is on, child is screaming, and you're standing 20 feet away at the door. What do you do? Every time I ask that question, people say, oh my God, you run up to the child screaming and you knock their hand away. And then I ask, why? Why would you knock the child's hand away from the open flame? And then they look at me like I'm crazy and they say, to stop the burning. And I'm like, why would you want to stop the burning? Why? Why would you want to stop the burning? And they say, to stop the pain, to lessen the damage, the pain, the burning. We want to like diminish it as much as we can. And then I say to them, fascinating. You see, because when you're in pain, emotional pain, you're not taking your hand off the flame. You're keeping your hand on the flame because you're fixated on the problem. And the more you think about the problem, the more your brain chemically induces the emotions associated with that. You see, you said something really beautiful, and everyone in the world says this, so don't beat yourself up. But you said, when you look at a negative situation, your responsibility is to look for the good. And I'm like, who said it's negative? What if it's not a negative situation? What if it's just a situation? You're defining situations good or bad. And I'm saying situations are just situations. Moments are moments. Time is just time. And we then assign a value or a meaning to, well, that worked out or it didn't work out. But if you zoom out, hindsight is 20/20. In hindsight, every single thing that has ever happened is always serving you. Everything that's ever happened is always perfect. It's so beautiful. It's so divinely orchestrated that in the end, you're like, thank God I didn't get that job. Oh my God, I'm so glad that person left me. Oh my God, I can't believe that. Because we can see. But we don't always have that vantage point because we have to wait 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 50 years, to get to a point where we can turn around and say, oh yeah, that served me. But while we're waiting the 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, our hand is on the flame. Our hand is in the pain. We're burning over and over. And every time we're like, I can't believe it, that I didn't get that job. Pain, hand is over the flame. Oh, I really wish I could have had that, feeling the pain. Oh man, this next job, it's probably going to be exactly the same, pain. And we keep inducing ourselves again and again and again and again. You see, here's the formula. Thoughts produce feelings. Every time you think a thought, your brain produces an emotion of that thought in the form of a chemical. So you think a thought, the brain assigns a chemical to that thought, it dumps into the body, and that transition is called emotion, and that emotion goes into your body. And so every time you're thinking, poor me, why me, can't believe that happened, I'm always late, things don't work out, money doesn't grow on trees, the world is a dark and scary place, any of those, an emotion is assigned to that, and that is being dumped into the body. But if you can pause and just say to yourself, well, that's fascinating, but why am I thinking that's bad? What if that's actually really good? And if you take a step back and you look at everything that ever happened in your life, like I just did, molested at 6.5 years old, terrible experience at that time. Had I been public with that experience, which I wasn't, and had I told anybody, they would have said to me, oh, that's so bad. I can't believe it. Poor you. Why would that happen? And it would have been a very different response. But I didn't. I sat with poor me, poor me, poor me until I buried it, until it came up later in life, and then I had to deal with it. And now I'm like, what a gift that I have that. The pain is in all the years it took to get there. If you could just turn around and say, I don't have to like the experience right now, but how is that experience serving me? I want to use this example for a second, and I know I'm belaboring because it's such a powerful point. And if we only have time to just touch on this one thing, I think that you have supported everyone that's listening to this. Because whenever something's happening in life, it's giving us, and it is, let me rephrase that, it's the answer to the asking, regardless of whether we like it or not. We have a thought, we want something, I want to do something, I want to be something. And then whatever happens in your life next is preparing you for the thing that you want. It's bringing you closer to it, even if it doesn't look like it. And we don't see everything in a linear path. So we're taking a meandering journey, but it is taking us to the inevitable future that we're going to. I heard a few stories that came out of 9/11, and it was so fascinating to read some of the recounts of what happened the morning of 9/11. There was a gentleman who was late for work, and he had a meeting and he needed to go. And as he ran out the door, his little boy ran after him. And I think his son was like 5 or 6 years old. And he said, Daddy, you can't go. You haven't done my book ordering form yet. And he was like, I don't have time to do your book ordering form. Like, I've got to be at work. I've got to go. And he said, no, Daddy, you have promised me every single night that you will fill out the order form for my books because it's like the book order this week. And his father, really pissed off, disgruntled, throws his briefcase in his car, turns around, goes back into his house and spends 15 minutes or 20 minutes with his son doing this book order form, really mad that he has to do this now, gets in his car and he is frustrated and he drives to work. And as he gets to the building comes down. And he's not in it, right? Wow. Another lady leaves her apartment and she picks up a cup of coffee and she's sipping her coffee and they don't put the lid on the coffee properly and she takes a sip and the coffee spills all over her white blouse. She drops a few F-bombs, she turns around, she goes back to her apartment, she lives in the city, she puts on a new blouse, goes back into the office. When she gets there, the building comes down, the top, and a plane hits and she's able to leave the building.
Wow.
Another lady's story walks into the building and she's standing at the elevator. She's got her hands full and she's waiting for it to open. And then all of a sudden it opens and a bunch of people push past her and they leave her standing in the lobby. She's holding all of these things. She cannot get them out of her hands. She can't push in. She can't hit the button. She can't do anything. And she's so mad, like, are you kidding me? Are you effing kidding me? Everyone gets in and just leaves me out. I was standing in front. Elevator goes up. Building comes down. She's able to run out because she wasn't in the elevator. Everybody in the elevator didn't make it. And the reason I share this with you is every single moment, whether you are being blocked on getting in an elevator, whether you get in a car and you have a flat tire, your car won't turn, the highway shuts down, you miss a plane, good God, this is my arch nemesis. When I miss a connection or they cancel a flight and I'm the first one to be like, unbelievable, I'm never flying that airline again. This is ridiculous. And then I have to be like, okay, Rudi, serving you, you don't know what you're being protected from. And so every moment is preparing you for who you get to become. When you do that, you change how you feel. Life becomes more free. Life becomes more joyful. Life doesn't become so serious because you realize there is a higher power that's serving you, that's moving you, that's preparing you. And you're part of that power. You're part of that flow and that force. And you get to decide, heaven, in my opinion, is how you choose to live here on earth. You can either make it hell or you can live in peace and joy and harmony. And when you miss your flight or your blouse gets spilt with coffee, you get to decide, like, am I going to make this mean something bad? Or is this just going to be a thing and I'm going to change it and I'm going to do the best I can next? And that's where the joy and the harmony comes from.
Yes, like I said, some of the most powerful lessons you told me are about this topic exactly. So thank you so much for recapping it. I think it's so important to hear. And I know it takes a while, at least it took a while for me to get into the habit of starting to look at things that way because I'm changing my habits. I'm rewiring my brain. I'm flipping the script on myself to have that more empowered question. And sometimes it takes some repetition to do that. So I'm glad we covered it really well today. Something that you talk about a lot, and for those of you who've not met Aniston, who's Rudi's co-host on his podcast, she's also magnificent and I adore her as well. And something Rudi talks about is having a 10 out of 10 in all aspects of his life. And I think that's something that we all aspire to have. And I know that relationships is certainly one where he has a 10 out of 10. And you've taught me a lot about relationships. And I've learned by example from listening and observing you and Aniston. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about relationships and having a 10 out of 10 in all departments of your life.
I think that, every single person gets to decide what is the quality of the life that they want to live. And that if you were to turn around and look at your life right now, everybody listening, and you were able to put a pie chart down, and then in each category, write down health, well-being, love, freedom, abundance, and you just keep going. Friendships, all of it. You just categorize what is important to you. And then you assign a number of 1 through 10 in each of those. How am I doing in money? So I go to my bank account, and I'm like, I got $50 in my bank account. All right, so that's not working. It's a 1, right? Or I go to my bank account and I see $1 million. And I'm like, well, is that working? And it depends. What do you want it to be? And so you assign the value of 1 through 10, because for everybody, it's going to be different. And then you go to health. You say, well, if I have money, so I got the $1 million I wanted, but I'm not healthy. So what's the point of the $1 million if I don't have the health? Or if you've got the health and you've got the money, but you don't have the love. So you don't have any relationships. You're 20-year-old Rudi, 25-year-old Rudi who's got the money. He doesn't have the girl. He doesn't have the guy friends, at least not the good ones, right? And he's struggling with the relationships and the friendships and the value. All of that is because at some point in time, you, me, and every one of us, we only ever have what we feel we are worthy of having. And if you don't have something, it's because you don't believe you're worth it. If you don't have $1 million in the bank account, it's because you don't believe you're worth $1 million. If you don't have freedom, you don't believe you're worth freedom. If you don't have downtime or joy or fulfillment or health or well-being, it's because you don't believe it. And if you believe you're worth something, you're going to have it. And so when you look at your life and you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, every area, you get to say, hey, how am I doing here? And it brings an awareness. Great, I'm good in these 3 areas. I'm really good in these 3 areas. I'm proud of myself in these 3 areas, but man, I suck in the others. And then you get to assign a value. What do I want to do differently so I can create a different change? I teach leadership. I go into all walks of life. Majority of my time is spent in companies because that's where the majority of people spend their time. And so I like to hit the largest audience I can, and that is going into organizations. And then I teach leadership. And leadership, people think, is for the leader of the company or the executive team, your C-suites. Leadership starts with the individual. Leadership is about leading oneself. And if you don't know how to lead you don't know how to lead your life, you're not qualified or prepared to be able to lead other people. And if your life is really good at work, but it sucks at home, you're not leading your life very well. You're leading a portion of your life well, but you're not leading your life well. And so what I really do is I remind people that we get to have a 10 in every single area, every category of our life. And then when we meet that 10, we then get to ask what's next. And we get to then stretch and further that goalpost. But at one point in time, I was in a relationship where somebody really loved me, but didn't treat me like they loved me. And I always felt like they were looking for the next best thing in every room they walked in. And if there wasn't anything better, well, then they would be good to be with me. And that's a terrible feeling to have. And at one point I had to say to myself, am I worth that? Like, is this it for me? Like, am I going to marry her? And it would have been a nice marriage. It would have been a nice life. And I'm sure it would have been great. But it wouldn't be what I have today. Because I deserve to walk into a room and know that the person I'm walking into a room with wants me, nobody else, and loves me and sees me and values me and appreciates me and doesn't cut me down and doesn't tell me, that my jokes aren't funny or that I talk too much or I talk too little or are you really going to wear that shirt or I don't like your hair or would you shave or would you not shave? Like just nitpicking. Like you don't deserve to have that. So in that moment, I got to ask myself, man, is that it? Is that what I want? And if I'm going to rate that, where is it? And I rated myself a 4 in my relationship. And that was a really hard truth because I sat down and I was like, 4 out of 10. Like, do I deserve a 4 out of 10? What would make this relationship a 6 out of 10? And then I wrote out what that would look like. And I was like, what would be an 8 out of 10? And I wrote that down. I was like, what would a 10 out of 10 look like? And now I was just daydreaming, fantasizing. What would a 10 out of 10 be? But in analyzing what does it look like and who do I want to be and who do I want to be with, I was able to realize, man, I'm dating the wrong person. And so even though it broke my heart, I broke up with her. I moved out. I left. I cried every single night for a year, maybe even 2 years, because I was heartbroken, because I thought she was the one. I thought that was going to work, but I didn't like the way she communicated with me. And so what I did was in that moment, put a stake in the sand that said, I deserve more. I believe I deserve more. And I'm prepared to be alone than rather be with somebody who doesn't see me, value me, or appreciate me. We do that in work. We can do that in relationships. We can do that in friendships. We can do that with family members. But here's the kicker. The minute I up-leveled myself, I started attracting incredible, kind, beautiful human beings that saw me, valued me, and appreciated me. And that wasn't just in relationships. That was in friendships. That was in careers. That was in clients. That was in opportunities. And all of a sudden, I started making more money. My life became more full. And then, yes, I met my soulmate. And when I met my soulmate, my whole life changed. But that would never have happened if I didn't at one point in time sit down and say, am I worth more? And if you're listening to this, if you don't think you're worth more in any area of your life, I'm going to stand here and tell you, you are absolutely worth a 10 out of 10 in every single area. In fact, you came here to live a 10 out of 10, but it's not about you. It's that when you achieve a 10 out of 10, when you have the incredible health, the well-being, the love, the full fulfillment, the freedom, the time, the relationship, all of it, you're an example to other people of what does it look like. And in doing you're teaching other people how to do them. And that's the most important part.
Related to something we spoke about earlier, because I think this is kind of a nice way to tie it all together. Let's take somebody for example. Let's take me for example. Let's say I'm at a job where I don't feel appreciated or I don't feel valued. And is that a situation where you need to look at it and say, I need to, leave the job and go somewhere where I do feel valued? Or is it a situation where you should look at it and think like, what is happening here? What is it in me that is not valuing myself? And it's being therefore reflected on the outside through my job situation. Does that make sense?
I feel like you asked and answered that question beautifully, because so many people think that they have to change everything else. They're changing the external. I'm not being valued or seen or appreciated at my work, so screw these guys. I'm going to go work somewhere else. Or I'm not being loved or treated with respect. You know what? I'm going to go and find somebody who will treat me with love and respect. And here's the kicker, though. You used the word mirror a moment ago, because every single experience is always a mirror to you. It's every moment is reminding you of who you are, how you're showing up in the world, how you are vibrating as a frequency, as an energy, and you are just drawing more and more like experiences. I dated a slew of girls that weren't available, that were cheaters, or would talk about me behind my back, or wouldn't treat me with love and respect until I increased my level of self-worth. So when I left that relationship and I said no more, I wrote out a list of all the qualities I wanted in my soulmate, my partner, and I put it in my pocket. And I read it every morning and every night. And then eventually I stuck that on the wall next to where I slept. And I read it every morning and every night. And on difficult days, I would take it off the wall and I'd put it in my pocket and I'd remind myself again and again and again and again, because I believed, no, I deserve what's on that paper. And that is that declaration. So that's doing the internal work. If you're in a job and you're unhappy in your job because you're not being seen or valued or appreciated, or you're being passed over, and let me tell you, I get so many of those calls. And people say to me, my boss doesn't like me, or I didn't get the bonus I want, or I'm not being respected, or I want this or that. And I'm like, great, none of that stuff means anything. You've got to do the work internally. Because if you leave this, you're going to phone me again and say, I'm in a new job, new boss, new place, new names, but same emotion. And it happens again and again and again and again. And until we do the inner work, we're not going to change the outer experience. I was on the phone with a client this morning who had months before shared just the traumatic experience of being raised by an overbearing father. Very, very strict, very disciplined, very successful, and expected like straight A's, 100% from his kids. When they would come home with a 97, he would say, why did you do the 3? What was wrong with the 3 that you couldn't get the 3? Not the holy smokes, wow, what an amazing effort, you got 97 out of 100. And so today we were unpacking a relationship, a divorce that didn't end well. And in the same conversation, I said, well, describe the emotion, describe how you felt. And all the words that she used to describe her relationship, she used the exact same words 3 months before to describe her father. And I actually said, I've got 2 pages. One was talking about your childhood, and today all the notes talking about your relationship. And I put them next to each other. And I said, look at the same words, same phrases, everything was identical. And you repeated them all except for one phrase. And the other phrase tied in. And so she's reliving the same emotions, the same state from her father, but she lived it in a marriage and in any other relationship before and after. And the only way to create the change is to ask, what is it that you're feeling? And so if you're being overstepped at work and people aren't seeing you, valuing you, appreciating you, it means you don't value and appreciate you. If you're not getting promoted because people don't think you're good enough, it's because you don't think you're good enough. If you're not being respected at work, it's because you don't respect you. And if you start to find ways to respect you, to value you, to appreciate you, to love you, then you're going to have people start to appreciate you, respect you, and love you. You know, I've been in environments where people say to me, Rudi, come into this company. I need you to get rid of these 5 or 6 executives. I need to replace them with these ones. I need more people that think like this and act like this. And I need you to help me. And I'm like, I'm not going to do any of those things. I was like, what if we just talk to the people? And then they're going to leave if they don't feel aligned, because they're not going to want to stay, because it's going to be blatantly obvious that they don't want to be here, or they're going to level up. And when we change how each person feels individually about themselves, the problems in that room just magically go away. And I say magically because it's not magic. It's you're doing the work, and no longer do you match the frequency of what it is that you're drawing. But people are always responding to you based on how you are showing up in any scene, moment, situation. And so I just want to encourage everybody, take accountability. Take accountability for what you're experiencing, for what you're feeling, and go back to the beginning of this episode and re-listen to it because it's serving you. And if it's serving you, who do you want to become at the end of it? And if you don't want to learn the lesson now, I promise you, it's so divinely orchestrated, the lesson will keep coming back until it smacks you in the face and you cannot avoid it. And what's easier is take your hand off the open flame right here, right now. Stop inducing yourself with chemicals of emotion, of looking at everything as bad, and say, how is this moment serving me? I like to do this exercise, and I'm going to give this to you because I think it's a tool that people can use. I like to pretend I chose it. I know it sounds crazy. And so, little 6.5-year-old Rudi was, molested. So, okay, great. Why would I choose that? Now, 6.5-year-old Rudi didn't choose that. Let's be very clear, okay? My older female cousin was brutally assaulted. Definitely, she did not choose that. She didn't do anything externally to invite that, but it happened. But when you ask the question, man, why would I choose that? Logically you didn't, but it changes how you feel about it. And now you're open to more information. And when you're open to more information, you can make very different decisions. And when I ask, man, why would I pick that? If I chose that experience because it was going to serve me, how does that serve me? Then I'm open to, man, I get to help people in my work do that. I get to support people. And then it changes the information. I want to ground that exercise because so many people are going to hear that and think, wow, what an insensitive man for saying that. The human brain picks up 10 million bits of data every single second. Sight, sound, smell, 10 million bits of data. You're only ever aware of less than 50 bits of data based on how you were feeling last. So if you're feeling like a victim, you're going to see 50 bits of data out of 10 million that reinforce you should still feel like a victim. When you ask an empowered question like, why would I choose that experience? Or how does that serve me? Either one of those questions will work. Your brain is now looking at 10 million bits of data, not 50, and it's reinforcing how does it serve you. And now you're finding new information on the same topic. And when you have new information, you can make new decisions or better decisions. And the more information you have, the better decisions you get to make. And I promise you, if you start to do that, your life will be very, very different in a very short amount of time.
Thank you, Rudi. Man, you've given so much to our audience today. These bits of advice, gold nuggets. I hope people are writing these down because they're so, so valuable, and they've been monumental in the way I look at and approach life. So in closing today, just reflecting on our conversation, if there's just one key takeaway that our listeners can remember from today's conversation, what would you say is the biggest key takeaway you want them to have?
That there's 2 ways to live your life. You can either live your life by default or you can live your life intentionally, purposefully, carefully, calculatedly planning who do you want to be. And every single moment you get to decide to assign an emotional value to anything. And that's going to put you either into a default or into an intentional category. I wake up every single day and I curate, who do I want to be? How do I want to feel? How am I going to show up today? I actually build the energy inside my mind and my body, and I imagine me living the best day I can. I know what's coming up in my calendar. I already woke up this morning, and at 6 o'clock, I was thinking about this podcast episode that was happening later in the day. How do I want it to go? How do I want to feel? How do I want people to receive this information? And then I send it all the way ahead to that moment in time, so that when I walk through my day, I'm reacting to what I created in my mind in the morning. And so if something's going wrong in my day, meaning it's not going the way that I had envisioned it in my mind, I have a vantage point of, hey, that's how I wanted it to go versus this is how it's going right now. And right there, I can pause and say, what do I need to do that's different? If you want to go anywhere, you need to know 2 points of reference. Where are you and where do you want to go? And if you know where you are and you know where you want to go, you can say, I need to course correct. But most people, they're not course correcting. They're reacting. And so they end up digging themselves deeper. And all you need to do is stop and say, where am I and where do I want to go? But if you don't know where you want to go, you're never going to be able to articulate it in the moment, especially with heightened emotion. And so my advice would be learn how to curate a morning that is going to set you up for success, that's going to prepare you, prime you to be the best that you can be, so that when you're leading in any moment of your life, because remember, leadership is always starting with the self, that you're leading as the highest and the greatest potential of who you came here to be. Whether you were responsible for a little 5-year-old girl or boy at home, or whether you run a 5,000 person company, you're responsible for every single person you come into contact with, but you're also responsible for yourself. And my advice is create the life that you were meant to live, the one that is a 10 out of 10, and show people through demonstration what that looks like, and then inspire other people by being an expander of what is possible so that everybody can move forward in life, living their highest and their greatest potential, because that's what it's for. That's the whole meaning of life. We're not here to make a dollar. We're here to make a difference. And the more we can pour into every single person around us, I promise you the greatest levels of joy and fulfillment and freedom you are ever going to experience will only ever come from giving selflessly of yourself every day in every single way. And so I just want to say I love you. To everyone listening, I freaking love you from the bottom of my heart. I know life is hard sometimes. I know that life can be a challenge, and I know life can feel really difficult, but I promise you it's the most beautiful journey, and you get to decide how do you want this journey to feel. And if you change how you feel about it, it's going to change everything, because remember, thoughts produce feelings, and thoughts and feelings drive behavior. The world wants you to change behavior. I want you to change your feeling. Change how you feel about something, and you're going to gain new access to new information, and you're going to make better decisions, which will change and alter the directions, which is the behavior of everything in your life. Your life is beautiful, and it's meant to be glorious, and it's meant to be this unbelievable divinity and perfection. And I just want you to be met with that every single day in every single way. But you can only do that if you do it on purpose, intentionally, calculatedly, planning, and then moving forward step by step to achieve it.
Beautifully said. In your opinion, this is my last question of the day, by the way. In your opinion, given that this is the Clarity to Consciousness podcast, what does it mean to you to live life consciously?
You know, we have so beautifully spoken about it throughout the entire episode today. 98% of the people on the planet are unconscious. They are literally just reacting. And to be conscious is to have a higher state of awareness, to add and assign value and meaning to everything. And that if something is happening in your life, it's not just happening because it's happening and you're there. It's happening because you're there. And if you're there, it's meant for you. So if you turn on the news today and you see that there's a fire, massive fire in California, there's value in the fact that you heard that message. It's not happening to you, it's for you. You felt something, you thought something, and because you were present to the experience was happening for you. Even though it's impacting many other people and you're not maybe there in proximity, but because you were present to the moment was happening for you. And in that, there's a divinity. And so consciousness to me is about living a life where you have a higher vantage point. Hindsight, 2020, we've got to go to another vantage point to be able to look back. We're in a hot air balloon. You go all the way up and you can look down and you can see the orchestration, the divinity and the roadmaps. And that's the beauty of life. And so my advice to everybody is to, really seek consciousness. I want you to seek the higher vantage point. I want you to look at a little further. And what's so fascinating is, consciousness comes through clarity, but you also get clarity when you get consciousness. And so it's this beautiful, infinity loop, because you kind of have to go to a place where you're looking at life for meaning. Every moment is meaning, and a meaning is about you. And that when you achieve that meaning, what you do with it is about everybody that is around you. And so if you stay grounded with that, I think that you'll live a beautiful, beautiful, conscious life.
Thank you, Rudi. How can people who are listening on the podcast today stay connected with you or access more information on the topics we've discussed?
I would say, put my email address and Instagram in the show notes, because I've got one of those names that is going to be mispronounced for the history of time. But Rudi Riekstins is Rudi, Riekstins, RIEKSTINS.com. Or you can catch me at Rudi Riekstins on Instagram or LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Kristen. I love you and I appreciate you. And I'm so grateful that you're putting this together.
Oh, I love you too, Rudi. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening. Until next time, bye for now. Before we part ways, I want to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for tuning in. Your curiosity and openness make this journey all the more meaningful. As we navigate the realms of consciousness together, please follow our podcast for more captivating conversations. If you enjoyed what you heard, why not share the love? Rate and review on your favorite platform and help us reach more seekers on this enlightening path. And hey, the conversation doesn't end here. Dive into the show notes for additional insights, resources, and details about today's discussion. Your journey to clarity continues beyond this episode. Thank you so much for being a part of the Clarity to Consciousness community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the boundless possibilities of your consciousness. Take care and much love to you all.